Good morning and welcome to the first Middle Mile Advisory Committee quarterly meeting of the year. My name is Jared Johnson. I am Chief Deputy Director of the California Department of Technology and Deputy State CIO. I am the acting chair today, filling in for Director Bailey Crimmins, who is unable to attend. I hope everyone enjoyed their holidays. There has been major progress since the last time we met in November of 2022. We have made major progress with the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative through the key areas that we'll be presenting today. The MMBI program has leveraged the state's newest procurement method, the Request for Innovative Ideas, or RFI Squared, a procurement method enacted by Governor Newsom's executive order in 2019. You will also hear about how over 70% of the 10,000 mile build has been released by Caltrans in job order contracting and construction management general contractor solicitations. And finally, CDT will provide an update regarding the most recent programs and outreach efforts with our tribal nations. First, I have the pleasure of introducing two new MMAC members. Our first newest member is Luis Alejo, a Monterey County supervisor in District 1. Appointed to be the Assembly Local Government appointee to the MMAC. Mr. Alejo, would you like to provide a quick introduction?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Supervisor Luis Alejo. I represent most of the city limits of Salinas in Monterey County. I'm currently the chair of the board, but I'm also very grateful to Assembly Speaker Anthony Rindot for appointing me to this position. This was something that I worked on closely with my good friend, Assemblymember Sharon Quirk Silva, in authoring AB 2256 to add 2 local government seats to this advisory committee. And I thought it was important because the nation is looking to California and how we deploy this landmark $6.25 billion project to close the digital divide in California. But I thought as an important part of that story is that local governments were at the table, local governments were engaged, and that's why it's a privilege to be able to serve on this committee. I'm also on the executive board of the California State Association of Counties, so I look forward to engaging a lot more colleagues, along with my colleague here from Del Norte County, Supervisor Starkey. So it's a privilege to look forward to working with all of you and with the members of the legislature who are also part of this advisory committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Alejo. Our second member is Valerie Starkey, a Del Norte supervisor in District 2, appointed to be the Senate's local government appointee to the MMAC. Ms. Starkey, would you like to provide a quick introduction?
Hi, I just wanted to introduce myself. I am Valerie Starkey. I represent District 2 in Del Norte County. We're a very rural, small community up in the very northern part of the state. I'm just getting up to speed. I was able to watch your November 22 meeting, where I was so impressed with the progress that you made in such a short amount of time. It is an honor to be here. Something that it was Mr. Naughton said that this was a dream come true. He said that in your meeting there, because it's something that has been wanted to work on for many, many years. And that really resonated with me. And being in a rural community, the importance of getting this access to our members and our residents that live here is something that I'm passionate about. And I'm just pleased to be here and willing to serve in any way that I can.
Thank you, Ms. Starkey. Next, we will proceed with roll call, hear brief comments from our members, then move to project updates, and finally public comment. Mr. Prisabilla, will you please call roll and review the meeting housekeeping items?
Good morning. The housekeeping rule statement is that attendees, please note there's time allocated at the end of the meeting for public comment. Presenters, please cue Sam to advance your slides. And committee members, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom to cue Chief Deputy Director Johnson to call on you to speak. Now, committee members, roll call. Deputy State CIO and Chief Deputy Director Johnson.
Present.
President Reynolds. Chief Deputy Director Miller.
Present. I'm just letting you know that both Assemblymember Wood and I don't have our cameras enabled by the host.
We will fix that now. Deputy Director Barry.
Present.
Secretary Tong.
Present.
Senator Gonzalez. Senator McGuire. Assemblymember Kirk Silva. Assemblymember Wood,
Here.
Mr. Alejo,
Present.
Ms. Starkey,
Present.
Chief Deputy Director Johnson, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Prisabilla. Are there any committee members who would like to provide brief comments before we move to the project updates?
Just a request to have my video enabled. I see Deputy Director Miller has, but I'm still hanging out here. This is Jim Wood.
We'll take care of that right now.
I think I would just say welcome Mr. Alejo and Ms. Starkey to joining, and definitely agree that local representation, it's important because middle mile is what brings the all the pieces together, but the last mile where it has a huge impact and a huge commitment and huge involvement needed from the local, it's important to complete the entire connection part of it. So really happy to have both of you join.
Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Tong. I don't see any other hands up for comment. So we are going to move on to our presentation. So first up, we'll start with the executive report out from Mark Monroe.
Good morning. Good morning to chair and members, and welcome to the first MMAC meeting of 2023. After a busy 2022, we are moving into an exciting time for the project over the next 2 quarters here. Let's see, can we move to the next slide? Thank you. As we've noted in the past, we have moved from primarily a planning phase into an execution phase. And so as a reminder, we are down to just under 2 years now for encumbering all of the federal ARPA funds, and down to just 4 years to complete development of the 10,000-mile network. So CDT continues to pursue strategies with its partners to meet these challenges. Today, we will be getting updates on 3 major components of these strategies, which include construction contract solicitations that will enable early mobilization, bid solicitations for alternative approaches such as leasing, joint builds, purchases, and co-location to ensure a complete network, and the state's accelerated and streamlined permitting effort that will enable construction to begin earlier. Can we go to the next slide here? So here's the timeline that we continue to use to track our progress on the MMBI project. You can see that the focus here on optimization in the first quarter. And so that's going to be a major focus for all of us in the coming months here. One thing I want to point out to the committee members is our pivot from earlier work where we were focusing on the entire network. Well, we had been exploring and reporting on both potential DIG Smart opportunities and the initial 18 projects announced in November of 2021. These early efforts will increasingly be subsumed in the broader network-wide middle mile development solutions for construction and leasing that we will be reviewing today. These broader efforts will provide economies of scale that we haven't seen from some of our initial efforts in terms of smaller DIG scale DIG Smart solutions. The construction contracts that will be discussed provide for construction of up to 78% of the network, as has been noted, and will include about 70% of the 885 miles that made up the initial 18 projects. So as CDT completes its optimization process, which we are targeting for this first quarter of this year, we are planning for Caltrans to follow up with any remaining construction segments by the first or second quarter of this year. And that's the end of my executive report out.
Thank you. Do any committee members have questions about Mr. Monroe's report? I'm not seeing any hand raised or hearing comments. Thank you, Mr. Monroe. So next up, we will have Mr. Adams continue with the Department of Technology update.
I'm sorry, Chief Deputy Director Johnson, I think we're the next thing on the agenda is to kind of go into the project updates. And then I believe the Scott Adams update on the outreach efforts will be part of that. So if we're ready to go into the project updates, I have yeah, there we go.
Yes, thank you.
I can jump into that if that works for everyone.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Monroe.
Absolutely. So in terms of kind of the thing we want to report on today is we've called this RFI squared, this request for innovative ideas. Most may remember that in order to collect a broader universe of potential solutions to complete the MMBI network, CDT went out to bid for alternative MMBI development solutions in addition to the standalone construction bids that Caltrans will be talking about. These alternatives include opportunities for IRU leases for existing infrastructure, of existing infrastructure, for purchases of existing infrastructure, joint build projects, and co-location of our electronic systems. Getting costs and location of these alternatives early provides key pieces of the puzzle in solving for the 10,000 miles. And in terms of what infrastructure exists and is potentially available to the state, and the cost of existing infrastructure or projects currently planned by industry. Bids were due at the end of December, and CDT received a total of 22 different proposals from 17 companies for a range of alternatives that we see here that we were looking for. We're certainly encouraged by the number of responses received and the potential miles that might be available from these. However, given the nature of these proposals, we are still going through them, and we'll be reaching out to bidders to get more information on locations and costs. Kind of as a little comparison here, when we normally go out for example, the construction contracts that Caltrans will be talking about, we would have more specifics in terms of exactly what we're looking for in the case of the 10,000 miles, in case of the specific mileage, locations, and such. When it comes to the RFI squared process, we really look for, we require the bidders to submit kind of concept, 10-page concepts and proposals. And so not all of them include all of the details that we would need to really kind of build them in. So this is going to be somewhat iterative. And so just kind of want to explain that we're going to have to be, so some have maps, some, more robust mapping, some have less, some have more detailed pricing information, some have less. So those are all part of what we'll be going through in terms of just evaluating those in the weeks to come here. But these proposals will be evaluated in the context of the construction contract bids we received last week as we optimize the network. So next, Deputy Director Scott Adams will be reviewing CDT's ongoing stakeholder engagement efforts for MMBI and more broadly for Broadband for All. Scott?
Thank you, Deputy Director Monroe, and good morning. MMAC committee members and members of the public. It's my name is Scott Adams. I'm the Deputy Director of Broadband and Digital Literacy, and it's my pleasure to give you a quick update on our outreach and engagement efforts as part of Broadband for All. If we could please move to the next slide. Wanted to note that I think the state entities working on Broadband for All understand that there are many stakeholders whose both partnership and collaboration are necessary to achieve Broadband for All and close the state's digital divide. And really want to stress, wherever possible, our outreach and engagement efforts are coordinated among the state agencies and other relevant partners like CDT, the Public Utilities Commission, Caltrans, and Golden State Net, to make sure that we're maximizing opportunities to engage with partners and provide information on the not just the middle mile, but the related last mile and digital equity efforts, to really stress that these are complementary and interdependent programs that are all designed to achieve Broadband for All. now that I've explained some of our methodology and approach, just wanted to highlight some of the unique and kind of diverse engagements that we've had since the last meeting. We met in the early part of December with the California WIC Association and the Central Valley Community Foundation to really stress how the Broadband for All programs are going to impact both their entities as anchor institutions and then their communities as a whole. A unique element of our outreach to the in partnership with the California Department of Food and Agriculture was to meet with the state fair directors, CEOs, given the real importance of state fair locations as anchor institutions to support both community development and emergency response during disasters. We had a very significant outreach with the Hoopa Valley, the Karuk and the Yurok tribe to really engage with those folks up in the north who have significant projects that really align and complement what the state is doing with the Middle Mile Initiative. And then really want to highlight the last three tribal engagement sessions. Broadly, the Middle Mile is a 10,000 mile network throughout the state. And aside from connectivity for all residents throughout California, there's a critical need and commitment to utilizing the Middle Mile to, in partnership with our tribal nation partners, to help address the connectivity needs in their tribal lands. And so we've conducted thus far 2 tribal engagement sessions. These are large scale engagement sessions with multiple tribes. The first on January 11th was with Southern California tribal nations. The second meeting that happened just a couple of days ago was with tribal entities in the north, and then we will have a follow-up engagement in early February with tribal entities in the central part of the state. So it's really what we're trying to demonstrate here is we both it's part of our value, and we've taken the feedback from this committee and other stakeholders that there is a need to make sure that folks are informed of all of the work that we're doing, and that they have an opportunity to both engage and partner and align with us. The last 2 items that I'd like to share with you is that the Department of Technology collaborated with the PUC on 2 related engagements. The first was developing a California Stakeholder FCC Broadband Mapping Challenge webinar. The NTIA and the federal government have the Broadband Access, Equity, and Deployment program, which is going to bring a significant portion of funding to support Broadband for All back to the state. That funding is determined by the FCC maps, and we worked with the PUC to bring stakeholders to the table to really encourage local entities to challenge that mapping process and update those so that the state share of funding could match the need. And then lastly, I wanted to give part of the work of this effort has been to streamline the permitting processes, and the Department of Technology, Caltrans, the state resource agencies have gone to considerable lengths to shorten that timeline. We were asked, Deputy Director Monroe and members of our staff were asked to present at the National Governors Association and to share some of the best practices that we've been doing here in the state for the benefit of other states. So I want to make sure you're all aware of that. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. Great deal of work going on in engaging the public regarding the state's broadband efforts. As I hope it shows, MMBI team is very excited about the progress we're making on the project with our business partners. And with that, it brings us to the end of CDT's project update, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I see that Secretary Tong, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just more of a comment, seeing great progress and really appreciate the updates, specifically on the stakeholder outreach, focusing on our tribal nation partners. And just want to give a shout out to Assemblymember Wood again that really was prompted by the visit a couple of us made up north a few months back. Gosh, yeah, that was a few months back. Last year, it was last year. I really emphasize on the needs to have good communication and constant communication to keep everybody informed of what's going on and then hearing their needs. So I just wanted to thank CDT to have taken the extra step to follow up with those engagement.
Thank you. Assemblymember Wood. You're on mute, Mr. Wood.
Thank you, and thank you, Director Tong. Appreciate that. Anybody's always welcome to come to the 2nd District. It's always welcome and eye-opening, I think, for people who haven't experienced some of the challenges some of our more rural areas have. So I appreciate that. I just wanted to ask a question going back to the very beginning of comments. Could we? I heard a comment something we're like 78% of the 10,000 miles under contract or something. I don't know if I heard that right. Can we describe what that a little bit more about what that means? And being under contract could mean a whole variety of things. Is there a possibility of getting a little bit more detail around that?
Absolutely. So when we'll kind of when we think about the construction contract, the tools we've been using, job order contracting and CMGC. So there's the construction manager, general contractor. For all the newer people, those are alternative contracting methods. We have normally there's a standard process that works really well when you're streamlining hundreds of transportation projects, design, bid, build. That's really been kind of how Caltrans normally builds these projects. It doesn't necessarily move them as fast as each one of them possibly could go, but overall it moves everything at a good pace, and it's a good standard process for Caltrans to follow. We don't have that luxury of that time frame with our timeline. So SB 156 allowed us to use some alternative methods. Job order contracting is one of them, and so we went out for 5,200 miles, and we received bids for 5,200 miles of job order contracts. And so those are broken up amongst 5 regions. The state's been broken into 5 regions for purposes of the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative. So those are 5, and Caltrans can kind of talk through a little more of the mechanics of this. But what that means is that we went out and presented to industry, here's 5,200 miles. What would it cost to build these? And there are a number of assumptions that have to go into that, right? Normally, Caltrans in the design, bid, build process, Caltrans would have taken a couple of years to go through its pre-construction work to figure out, well, what is the dirt in each area like, right? And so Caltrans has a lot of institutional knowledge at the district level that we can kind of pull from, but we wanted to. It's very important as we move forward with the project to get contractors to mobilize sooner and to really be on board sooner, as well as to achieve some economies of scale. So we went out with those contracts with that concept in mind. So when I say that we've gone out with 5,200 miles of job order contracts, we've now got bids, estimated bids on what it would cost to build those under a number, literally hundreds of situations, different kinds of dirt, different kinds of construction methods, and we'll have to kind of further refine those as we go along. So that's for the 5,200 miles. That's what that involves. We won't necessarily need to build all 5,200 miles. So I think that's important to note. It's 5,200 miles so far. But if when we see these prices, one of the things we're going to be able to do is refine our estimates of how much we can afford to build within the given funding. Currently, we're working on a budget of $3.8 billion. And so as we refine and figure out how much we can afford to build, well, we have 5,200 miles out. Maybe we end up only needing to build 4,800 miles because the other can be leased as an alternative. So as we go through the optimization process, we're going to refine that. So I hope that kind of provides a little scale, certainly on the job order contract. And then when we talk about the CMGC, the construction manager, general contractor, and that's where Caltrans will, as part of the construction contract, kind of as a preliminary phase, they'll have a construction contractor come in and help them design the project. And so we don't necessarily get upfront bids from that. But what that does is help us get bid costs sooner and help Caltrans design the project in a way that's going to be able to move as quickly and as inexpensively as possible. So those are kind of the two different values and the way we're looking at those. The CMGC contracts are more specific. We have, I think, 1,700 miles of those so far. Those are more specific too. We're definitely going to, build those. So does that kind of help answer your question a bit in terms of what we mean when we say 78%?
Yeah, that's helpful. I appreciate that. And this ability to work this way was specifically because of the terms in SB 156, correct?
Yes. Yeah, it's very valuable tools.
So those might be really valuable tools for the future for a lot of other things, if we could find a way to make that happen and faster, more efficient. Yeah.
Yes,
Hope
indeed.
other people are hearing.
Dr. Wood.
Thank
Yes.
you. Okay.
We are working on that across government. This
Yeah,
has been a really good learning opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. Thank you, Assemblymember Wood. Mr. Alejo, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just agreeing with my former colleague, Assemblymember Wood. But I wanted to thank Mr. Monroe. It's just exciting to see that the state is being aggressive and ambitious in trying to move these contracts out much sooner and trying to keep to our timelines and making this a reality as soon as possible in California. I know that the list of outreach efforts is only for the first till the end of February, but as a new local government representative, I kind of envision part of my responsibility is helping do some of that work in the future with at least the local government associations, be it CSAC or RCRC, the rural counties, the League of Cities, or the California School Boards Association. So I know they have their annual conference throughout the year, but if there's some opportunities to plug in those opportunities to update those other local government associations, I would be willing to help in making those presentations and providing those updates as we make progress on this significant goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Alejo, welcome. And I do want to respond to that comment because we have, I think, really endeavored to establish strong relationships with both CSAC and RCRC as outreach partners. And so we have presented at their annual convenings and also invited them to our Broadband for All summits and roundtables. The last one we had on October 24th. But I think one thing, and this is really a call to action to make you aware of, is that part of the digital equity planning and broadband equity access and deployment planning process over the next year, that CDT and PUC will be, in addition to these large-scale virtual convenings and the individual consultations, establishing 20 local engagement events that will really be, full day, multi-stakeholder, opportunities for engage local and regional partners. And so I want to make sure that you're aware of those and that we're in the process of planning those. And that's going to be an opportunity to really get granular and local with our stakeholder partners.
Great. Look forward to that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Thank you, Mr. Alejo. Are there any additional comments? Okay, then we are going to transition to our update from Caltrans and Ms. Janice Benton.
All right, good morning, Chair Johnson, committee members, and others from the public. Thank you for having me. My name is Janice Benton. I am the Assistant Deputy Director over the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative for Caltrans, and will be providing an update on the progress being made to build the 10,000 miles of Middle Mile broadband. So next slide. So Caltrans's update reflects the progress made since the November MMAC meeting. At the end of last year, Caltrans shared that we had advertised 70% of the Middle Mile broadband network, which includes the 5 regional job order contracts that account for 5,200 miles. Earlier this month, as was mentioned earlier, the bid advertisements closed and there were 29 bids submitted for the 5 contracts. Caltrans is reviewing the submittals to review the bid item calculations as well as verify the responsiveness to the bid requirements. We shared the information with CDT as well, and will be working in the coming weeks to award the master agreements for the 5 regional job order contracts. Additionally, with projects leveraging the Construction Manager General Contractor or CMGC delivery, the advertisements have closed for approximately 1,900 miles. And earlier this month, of those 1,900 miles, we've awarded 2 contracts for pre-construction services or the construction manager portion, totaling nearly 400 miles. And there's an additional 460 miles that we are leveraging CMGC, and those are currently being advertised. We are also making strong progress on permitting efforts and continue to work with our partners at the state and federal resource agencies to get programmatic permits and approvals to meet the environmental and federal land access requirements, which I will cover in a subsequent slide. So next slide. These charts reflect the progress made on pre-construction activities. The charts show the percentage of completed tasks in green, the percentage of in-progress tasks in blue, and the percentage of miles where preliminary project decisions are to be made, and those are shown in gray. So next slide. This slide breaks down the previous slide and shows by Caltrans district the miles assigned to projects and the advancement that has happened in each of the districts. We continue to see progress being made month over month and continue to see the amount of green or completed tasks increasing. I do want to highlight that we're seeing substantial progress in multiple districts, including District 9 in the Inyo and Mono County area, District 6 in the Central Valley, District 7 in the LA and Ventura County area, and District 4 in the Bay Area. I also want to note that for those areas that are indicating not started, we are working closely with the districts to ensure the evaluations continue, and we will have an update at the next MMAC meeting for those miles. So next slide. So while we cannot avoid environmental permitting and approvals completely, we are taking numerous steps to minimize and as much as possible avoid the issues in areas with known complexities. We are continuing to work with our partners at the state and federal resource agencies to get the programmatic permits and approvals to meet the environmental and federal land access requirements. Programmatic permits are issued for multiple projects that are similar in scope. So in this case, the middle mile broadband network. With this effort, the programmatic permits will cover regional and statewide activities. The outcome and benefits of these programmatic efforts are reduced timelines. So rather than having to complete individual permitting for projects, a process that can take roughly around 6 months, projects can use the programmatic permit and its conditions. In addition, the programmatic approach adds predictability by reducing uncertainty of permit conditions. These conditions are negotiated and included in the programmatic permits, reducing the unknowns for the district level projects. If you will also recall from the early MMAC meetings, this slide indicates the total potential reduction in timelines is estimated to be up to 19 months. This is a result of the streamlining efforts and exploring opportunities to avoid and minimizing impacts to biological and cultural resources. So next slide. So as we move from the theoretical of how the programmatic permits provide time saving that benefit the middle mile to the on-the-ground implementation and what the timeline actually looks like, I want to start by walking you through this graphic and all of the progress that is happening. Starting with the top left corner, we begin with the list of environmental permits and approvals required for construction to begin on the middle mile broadband projects. The chart then reflects key milestones. Application submittal, noted as submitted on the chart, and availability for projects to leverage, noted as available on the chart. And the chart reflects when they were either reached. So for example, the 2022 dates shown as highlighted with the check mark, or when we anticipate attaining the milestone shown in the 2023 dates shown as outlined. While this chart starts in August of last year, significant work was needed prior and will continue throughout. So for any single programmatic permit or approval, months of communication, cooperation, and partnership with each agency go into the application submittal. These efforts are shown on the chart as underway and could include efforts such as pre-application meetings and public notices. Fortunately, we are able to leverage the Caltrans established relationships to do the programmatic approach. In looking at this chart, we are already able to leverage several programmatic efforts, including the statutory exemption for CEQA provided in SB 156, noted in the top left corner, the Caltrans NEPA assignment from the Federal Highway Administration, also noted in the top left corner, the programmatic agreement for the cultural historical preservation approvals through the State Historical Preservation Office, also referred to as the Section 106 programmatic agreement. That one is noted in the August through September 2022 timeline in the bottom left. And the next one is the stormwater permit required by the State Water Board, also referred to as the Construction General Permit, which was finalized in December 2022, noted in the middle of the chart on the bottom. For those programmatic permits that are not yet available, and using the permit required by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as an example, the chart shows that in August to September section, which is in the orange, the permit application was submitted. So prior to officially submitting the application, Caltrans works closely with the Corps over several months to ensure that the application is complete, which requires multiple pre-meets and close coordination. So following the chart through the May 2023 through the June 23 section, which is the navy blue, we anticipate the Corps having finalized its review process and the permit being available in May of 2023. Another example I want to talk through is the coordination underway with the Endangered Species Act Section 7 request from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. For many months, Caltrans has been doing the preliminary work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife offices on the programmatic biological opinion request. And with approximately 200 species and critical habitats that may be covered by this request, it is one of the most complex Section 7 processes that Caltrans has navigated. To follow this effort, we look to the August through September of 2022 in the orange section, when we coordinated on the species list to submit to the Fish and Wildlife. We anticipate submitting the formal Section 7 request next month in February 2023, which is listed in the turquoise section. And lastly, we anticipate the programmatic biological opinion being available for the districts to use in July of 2023, as noted in the green section. So I also want to point out, although the California Coastal Commission Consolidated Coastal Development Permit shows submittal in January 2024, as shown in the upper right, we continue to coordinate with the many local coastal programs and the 6 Caltrans districts to complete that process sooner. And as each of these programmatic approaches are being developed, it is important to note that the districts have been and continue with their coordination with each of their regional partners to make progress on the final approvals. So for projects to utilize the programmatic approach, it will require individual submissions such as checklists or applications to leverage the programmatic approaches. Our Caltrans districts are then able to benefit from the shorter timelines and the predictability of the negotiated permit requirements. So in closing, we continue to take the necessary steps to move projects forward. As the new year gets underway, we look forward to leveraging the significant work that took place last year to be able to begin issuing the work orders and work packages that will translate into construction underway and progress we can share with the committee in future meetings. So Caltrans remains committed to this broadband initiative and will collaborate with the Department of Technology to address the challenges and continue to find opportunities to accelerate the deployment of the middle mile network. This concludes the Caltrans update, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Benton. Do any committee members have questions or comments about Ms. Benton's update? And it looks like Assemblymember Wood, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Benton. I appreciate the presentation. District 1 has the greatest need and shows the least amount of progress. And so I'm wondering where is there a detailed plan as how we get this district on the move here? Because like I said, the greatest need, the least amount of progress, and time is ticking. So I would have expected more, quite frankly.
Yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Wood. So yes, we are continuing to collaborate with District 1 as well as all the other districts in developing a delivery plan. We do anticipate some work going into construction in the next 6 months, and that goes for all of the districts, not just District 1. In addition, we are working closely with District 1 to resolve any of the big challenges that they may be having outside of what we've been communicating with them recently. We actually have a meeting with District 1 this afternoon.
So we started all this over a year ago, and we don't, you're telling me that we don't have a plan yet? We're still working on a plan?
No, we do have a plan, but what we're trying to do is just put that down on paper so we can start communicating to others in terms of when the work actually gets to construction. We have the plan. We're just trying to nail it down, and then we want to provide everybody with that update
And that will happen when?
in the next 2 months.
And we'll be able to see that plan?
Yes, we can report back at the April meeting on that plan.
So I guess I think a part of this going back to so CEQA's out there. Have all these things started? Has CEQA started? Has I see there's a permit application that won't even go to the Coastal Commission until 2024. Why is, that's a year from now. So I'm baffled. I part of this just doesn't feel terribly streamlined to me.
So before we submit an actual application, we coordinate with all of the stakeholders and parties involved. So for example, with the Coastal Commission, we're collaborating with each of the local coastal programs. So each, which is similar to each city or county within that coastal district. So we're collaborating with each one of those. The first step was developing the coastal development design guidelines, which is indicated on the chart, which was shown I think it's in the December 2022. So it started with that, working with the Coastal Commission to come up with that design guideline. Now we're taking those guidelines and working with each of the local coastal programs and getting their buy-in on those guidelines. And then once they get on board, then we can submit the consolidated permit for that area. So there's a lot of collaboration. Both the Coastal Commission and their staff are working closely with us to help in that communication with the local coastal programs. The coastal ones are more complex.
So I guess originally we heard that, we're taking these 30+ months of permitting and all that's going to be consolidated down to, I think, 17 months or something. Is that?
Yeah, I also want to just add that as we're working on the programmatic efforts, the districts are also working at their local level and with their regional stakeholders and partners as well. So they're not just sitting there waiting for us to do the programmatics. This is just a rundown of the programmatic efforts that is going to help them in the long run. But they're continuing to work on any studies that need to be done, any items to fulfill the programmatic permit. There's ongoing work on all of that as well. And there's close collaboration between what we are doing on the programmatic efforts and then also what the districts are working with their regional partners.
Okay. Well, I'm a reasonably intelligent person, and I'll be honest with you, some of your graphics are really hard to follow, like that first one you put up with all the bars and things there. It's like, is there a way to simplify some of that stuff? I don't know. I mean, we've talking about streamlining things moving forward, but when I saw the arrow thing that went up there and I see all those dates and timelines, that doesn't feel very streamlined. It just feels like you got multiple processes going on here, and it's pretty darn confusing. So when we're talking about the 30 months to 17 months, can we have a snapshot of exactly what that is? And if these other things are being streamlined for the programmatic part of that, can you break that out in a different way so that we understand for the middle mile piece of this, where we are in the process, it's really, really hard to follow. And I hope that's not intentional.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not intentional.
Really hard to follow.
Yeah, we keep coming up with different graphics to try and
Not
demonstrate.
working.
where we are.
For me anyway, sorry.
Right. Yep.
I'm
So,
paying a lot of attention to this, and I'll go back to my frustration is like, I have the district that has the greatest need and the least amount of progress. And I see these graphics and I see all this, and I don't see progress. So I'm a little frustrated. And so if there's someone who is willing to sit down so that I don't take more time here, I know out of respect to other people, to really walk me through and help me understand where we are, because I don't get it.
okay, we can definitely do that, Mr. Wood.
I hope
think-
I'm not alone, or I hope I am alone, but I don't get it.
Yeah, we can definitely sit down with you and any other member that wants to go through these in detail. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Benton. Thank you, Assemblymember Wood. We have several other hands that went up and try to do this in order. Chief Deputy Director Miller.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you to Dr. Wood. I think we have understood that the district's approach to building is something that we continue to work on. So I do think that we can continue to find ways to present the information in a way that is more accurate, and also even though the progress is less than we'd all hoped, we do want to be really transparent that this is also a way to hold districts accountable. So we will continue to be really transparent so that you can see what's happening. But I think we do appreciate your partnership in this and making sure that we can drive it forward. Just to build, Dr. Wood, on what you were saying earlier in terms of ways to streamline permitting writ large across the state, it's obviously a big interest in general of the administration as we bring in federal dollars and just make sure that we are building a more resilient future for California. So is it fair to say that the 18-month reduction is across the board, that this whole project will take 18 months less than expected because of the provisions of SB 156? Or is it almost a 2-year reduction? Just based on, I don't know if Mr. Monroe would be better to answer that question.
Well, I guess what I would say, it's what we anticipated, estimated on average, because we're working with each resource agency. Each resource agency has their requirements and processes and procedures. And so that's what we're estimating. The first timeline with the bars going across was kind of just a general timeline. If you start at month 0 and you go to month whatever. The second one that we put up there was trying to put that into actual dates and demonstrate, an actual month and year of when things started or when things would be available.
Yeah, and I think so. So I'll just jump in a little here. Yeah, in terms of answering your question, yeah, we know that on those average timeframes, as Ms. Benton noted, they were looking at 30 months as kind of the average. And with SB 156, certainly, I think that time was reduced to at least 17 months, and we're really trying to take it down to 10 months. But as Ms. Benton noted, you have to still, that assumes you're starting at month 0 all at the same time. And I think what Caltrans is talking about here, what they've kind of shown on this new the chart with the arrow, I think what they're trying to show there is that when they started and kind of how they're moving along that process. And I know I think presented the newer plan last August is when I think Caltrans had presented that. And so they've been trying since then to kind of hit those 0 marks where you're starting that application process. But that I think is where you're seeing not everything started on day 0. Ms. Benton, is that kind of what you're trying to say there?
Yeah, because there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes in terms of trying to get that application ready, a lot of coordination and discussions with the resource agency as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Secretary Tong and then Mr. Alejo.
I think Mr. Alejo first, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Alejo.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to just follow up on Assemblymember Wood's question, because certainly we all recognize environmental review is an important part of getting things done in California, but even in local government, to get any housing or water project, it gets really bogged down and delayed significantly in terms of that process, and adds a lot of cost as well. But so part of the NEPA or CEQA, there's also the public comment periods, the postings of the environmental reviews, public comments. And what often bogs things down is when there is opposition. Do we envision that being an issue for any of the steps lined out, that we might get any groups in opposition that may perhaps delay the timelines further?
We're not anticipating any major opposition or delays. And that's why all the outreach and the engagement that Mr. Adams mentioned earlier is really important, making sure everybody understands what is the project, what are we really doing. In addition, all of the efforts that we're doing to avoid a lot of these resources, whether it's an environmental or cultural resource, that's been the key to success as well, is with this type of project, we can avoid a lot of those resources to eliminate any of the opposition.
Great, thank you for that.
Secretary Tong.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I definitely, if you know, at the next meeting, maybe we spend more time specifically to do more drill down on the permitting process. And I think the permitting process is in conjunction with the district process of whether it's prep work or submitting, and once it's submitted, how long does it take? And I think I'm hearing, you know, the conversation here that, and Mr. Wood, to your point, you know, the diagram, I know there's different version, but it just overall is a very complex item, plus the dimension of each of the duration of the permit have reduced from 30 months to, you know, now hopefully 11 months. But because the submission of those are submitted on a rolling basis, right? You're not looking at all of them to start at once, nor all of them completing at once. And that's, I think, what we probably need to have a better sense, and this is figure out how to do it visually, is that even with the rolling basis, as the permit complete, construction begin, and then so on and so forth. So everything is staggered. But for some of the ones that, why is it taking so long to even submit it, a permit? Like that's, I think, is a District 1 conversation. Like, what is taking so long to have some of these lag in submitting? Why can they be, you know, all starting as closer at the beginning as possible? I think those are the things we can probably delve into a little bit more as a way of, just from an efficiency aspect. You know, once you have that momentum of preparing, submitting, and once it's approved, you construct, the closer we can bring in, if all of them happening at once instead of a long tail at the end, I think is the better from an economy of scale aspect. I think that's the conversation we'll probably want to explore more if we have a better visual to kind of help facilitate that conversation. So that's my suggestion. Perhaps this is something we can do in March meeting.
Thank you, Secretary. Assemblymember Wood, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did, and that was and first of all, and thank you for the dialogue. And you know, and I imagine there are other members who probably have concerns about their districts as well. And so that, yeah, I'm very focused on my district. That's just my job. But you know, we've heard, you know, you've got the agencies all working on things, and I think, as I recall from an earlier meeting, that at one point you actually had a convening or have had a convening with all the agencies at one point. It sounds like now, though, they're all back in their silos, doing their thing in their silos. And so are we not continuing to have coordinated meetings with all of the agencies? And are not all the agencies all working together, or are they just continuing to work in their silos, which is the way life seems to happen in government mostly?
So we are continuing to work with all the agencies. We have weekly meetings, check-in meetings with all of them.
Together or individually?
So the weekly check-ins are together. We do a state one and a federal one. sometimes combined. But each agency, when we're working on a permit, for example, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, some of them are connected. For example, the U.S. Army Corps and the Water Board. Some of those permits are connected, and we work together with them and collaborate on the programmatic approach. But there isn't necessarily a means to connect when we're working with California Coastal Commission and we're working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Those are different permits, different requirements. They look at them from a different perspective with a different lens. So they are separate permits to obtain moving forward.
But I guess for me, it's separate permits, separate. I understand all that, but with the eye on the goal, on what we're trying to accomplish, not just the eye on the individual piece of it. Do you understand where I'm going?
Yeah, I think, Ms. Benton, if I may, I do. I think this is really helpful, Dr. Wood. I think let's take this feedback. I hear a lot of it. I think what we owe you is the results of the meeting from District 1 at Caltrans and the sense of urgency as the only district that hasn't moved since November. And then the second thing we owe you is how we're taking this all of government coordinated approach and how it'll be executed. So maybe if we can take that as an action item and report back to you at the next meeting. Does that sound okay, Ms. Benton and Dr. Wood and Secretary Tong? Okay.
It's great for me. I think it's ultimately every district,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the coordinated approach affects the entire state, and I think that's a great action item for us to take. The specifics around District 1 is the other way that we'll report back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent dialogue and more work to be done on streamlining the permitting process. Are there any additional comments before we move on? Okay, our next update today is from the Golden State Net, the third-party administrator, Tony Naughton. Mr. Naughton.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Tony Naughton, Chief Operating Officer of Golden State Net. Pleased to be here to provide this update in this quarterly MMAC meeting. As has been mentioned with regard to the RFI squared process for joint builds and other services or relationships, that was issued last quarter. Of course, Golden State Net GSN assisted CDT in the creation of that. And now we are continuing to support CDT in the process of qualifying and assessing the bid responses that have been received. We will be advancing negotiation in coordination with CDT with qualified RFI squared bid respondents for a variety of these offerings. And again, these are quite important. A variety of offerings such as lit services on the network, sale or IRU leasing of existing dark fiber or conduit, network and server co-location services, joint builds resulting in facilities ownership by CDT and the like. These are all critical pieces that will comprise the infrastructure of the MMBI program, and we look forward to making progress with qualified bid respondents on these. If I can go to the next slide, please. I think we're actually a slide behind. Next slide beyond this one, please. Very good. As we move into the execution phase, the program plan is seeing additions and refinements. And once again, the program plan is an execution playbook for the timing and processes and approaches to developing this network, involving both new build construction, joint build construction with existing carriers, as well as leasing dark fiber IRUs or conduit with carriers that have that infrastructure available. Just to revisit the logical construct that we have offered for the coordination and planning of this large program. We're doing this in the construct of assemblies, where there are three core assemblies to this infrastructure: the fiber assembly, the HUT and HUT systems assembly, and the nodal assembly. The first two assemblies, fiber and HUT, are within the MMA, are being treated as civil engineering, if you will, and therefore the work to be performed for these falls under the Caltrans GOC and CMGC bidding processes. The nodal assemblies of active electronics, such as network switches and routers, are collectively the service architecture of the network, which will be primarily located within and across the approximately 183 retransmission huts to be developed for the network. That nodal assembly work is within the province of the network operator, which of course will be GSN Scenic, and therefore GSN is taking a primary role in the installation, testing, and creation of these nodal assemblies for the service architecture. In addition, and of great importance to the development of this network, is a strategic development plan that will be created with CDT and Caltrans for coordination and sequencing of network development rollout schedules. This is really important in order to optimize logistics for labor and resource delivery, establish priorities relating to the creation and production operation of the network, and to ensure quality performance, quality assurance of the network infrastructure being developed. Next slide, please. We've engaged in an optimization process for CapEx savings by means of developing an alternative service architecture. We've received very good support in an engineering sense from Scenic on this effort. It's essentially an alternative plan, a cost optimization plan that will reduce the number of switches and routers in the network in order to scale back initial CapEx expenditures, also bring about a reduction in initial CapEx, also bring about a reduction in the later operation and maintenance costs. If you have less equipment, you have a lessened operation and maintenance burden there. This architecture will, as an alternative to the primary architecture that was first recommended, this will result in significant cost savings from a CapEx and OpEx standpoint, but it's a really important thing to note that that will be the result without reducing the number or type of services being offered by the MMBI network, and quite importantly, will not reduce service integrity, service quality, or network resiliency within the system. I should also note that this alternative optimization approach will be nonetheless an expandable architecture, and it will still be able to facilitate network expansion and additional network capacity as needed. If we can go to the next slide, please. On community engagement, Matt Rantanen, who is Golden State Net's team member responsible for tribal liaison and support, and who is also in attendance with us in this meeting today, along with Eric Hunsaker, our Vice President of Network Development. They continue to engage and have discussions with many tribes around the states. These interactions are based on how this network can better meet the needs of both the limited number of tribal broadband networks that exist today, as well as those that will come into existence going forward as a result of state and federal grant funding they receive for the development of last mile tribal broadband. The availability of tribal last mile networks of middle mile, this will result in significant cost savings for new last mile networks developed, whether on tribal lands or otherwise. And we continue to expand and coordinate our involvement with Scott Adams and the Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy to address broader community outreach in general beyond just tribal communities. And these involve interactions with OBDL and Scott, as well as with our parent organization, Scenic, with many regional government groups, MPOs, regional broadband consortia, all above and beyond the tribal engagements I just described a moment ago. We can go to the next slide, please. As we've mentioned before, a fiber management system is a key foundational piece to the ability to develop and construct a network of this kind. A commercial entity has been selected under the first of the RFPs issued for key software platforms. We've mentioned these in previous MMAC meetings. the first one being the fiber management system. It's expected that a purchase agreement for the FMS will soon be completed, and Golden State Net expects to then soon be populating this system with specific route mapping and related facilities information and data. And all of this will bring the FMS environment to life in support of the entire MMB program for network development, MMBI program for network development. Excuse me, I'm a little dry in my throat here this morning. As I've previously mentioned, the FMS system will be the first of what will be a broader set of essential applications, such as an inventory management system, a customer relationship management system, a billing system, and the like, that will be used to both develop and operate this middle mile broadband network. And if we can go to the next slide, please. There's additional work that Golden State Net has been engaged in, which is certainly worth mentioning here by brief update. We've provided CDT with a set of practices and policies to ensure the physical security of network facilities. Those are mainly around the huts, where we have, as I said, approximately 183 of these around the state. And we will deploy state-of-the-art electronics and network, physical security technology for the protection of those facilities. We've been deeply engaged in operational and resource planning with CDT, involving the role of the Network Operations Center that will be the brain of the network for monitoring and communication purposes, if you will, runbook logging and usage. All of these things play an important role in both network development construction as well as operation of the network once it becomes production capable. In addition to that, we have spent a great deal of time working with CDT and Caltrans for the amendment in the case of the interagency operating agreement, an amendment that facilitates the construction processes and administration, as well as an additional agreement, the right-of-way use agreement with each individual district that CDT will engage with, dealing with important topics such as encroachment onto the right-of-way for construction and maintenance purposes. We've also spent quite a bit of time over the last quarter working on both the foundational go-to-market plan that I mentioned in our last meeting, adding refinements to that, as well as the business plan, which focuses on projected operating expenses as well as projected revenues. The first focus for the business plan, again, is for the initial 5 years of operation. But this model analysis will take it well beyond that and over time project out numbers in the business model sense over a 20-year period of time. We, of course, continue to work towards hiring additional staff for Golden State Net in a variety of roles that will be necessary on our direct internal team as we move into the construction and execution phase of this program. Are there any questions I can answer from committee members?
Thank you, Mr. Naughton and GSN team. Do any
Thank you very much.
committee members have questions or comments? Not seeing any hands raised. So next we are going to move on to our final update before we hear public comment today. And that will be from Jonathan Lackritz of the Public Utilities Commission. Mr. Lackritz.
Thank you, Acting Chair Johnson. Good morning, committee members and members of the public. My name is Jonathan Lackritz, and I'm the Program Manager for the Broadband Infrastructure Branch in the California Public Utilities Commission's Communication Division. I'll be providing a brief update on a number of the CPUC's last mile broadband initiatives. Next slide, please. This slide provides a summary of the Local Agency Technical Assistance Grant Program. At the end of last year, the CPUC had awarded technical assistance grants to 69 applicants for a total of $30 million. We launched the Technical Assistance Grant Program in July of 2022 and have received 111 applications totaling $50.6 million in funding requests. Program funds are available to reimburse eligible local entities and tribes for pre-construction last-mile broadband development costs, including needs assessments and strategic plans. The CPUC will be seeking additional LATA funding and will continue conducting additional outreach, external outreach to interested program applicants. More information may be found on the links included in the slides. Next slide, please. This slide provides a summary of the recently released priority areas for the federal funding account. The federal funding account provides up to $2 billion in grants to eligible entities to construct last-mile projects to provide unserved Californians with affordable and reliable broadband service. The federal funding account priority areas were optimized with a statewide model to mix low-cost and high-cost unserved locations to create sustainable projects across the state. Programmatically, the priority areas are predefined, assumed eligible areas where entities can apply for broadband infrastructure grants. However, applicants can add, modify, or propose new project areas in addition to any of the priority areas. The first drafts of these priority areas were created with the best granular broadband data available at the time. As a first draft, it will benefit from on-the-ground information and updated data. A map of the priority areas is currently available on the CPUC's website. The website includes explanations and downloadable data. The map includes a comment or feedback function, so you can comment on a priority area, county, or other geography. And we encourage everyone to provide comments that will help us make the best possible list of priority areas. This is a new analysis, and we want to be realistic that the first draft will not be perfect. And we want to hear from the public and communities with on-the-ground and updated information. In addition to obtaining valuable feedback on priority areas, we intend to release an applicant portal for potential applicants to develop and propose projects in the coming months. I'd like to add some additional context to the federal funding account. As we know and confirmed by our models, the federal funding account alone is not enough funding for the last mile need. Other programs and funds are on the horizon, including the bipartisan Infrastructure Law Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, or BEAD program. If you have any questions about priority areas, please email statewidebroadband@cpuc.ca.gov. Next slide, please. This slide provides a further update on the grant opportunities available through a number of California Advanced Services Fund accounts. These grants fund activities that support the Last Mile Broadband Initiative. The Broadband Adoption Account provides grants to public entities and community-based organizations to promote digital literacy and broadband access. 74 projects were awarded a total of $5.9 million in 2022. We recently closed another application cycle in early January and received 37 new broadband adoption grant applications, requesting a total of $7.6 million. Consortia grants help regional consortiums, which are groups of public entities and community-based organizations, to develop broadband projects and complete the grant application process. The 15 consortia applications filed in 2022 were awarded a total of $10.3 million earlier this month. Another opportunity is the grants to public housing and low-income communities to provide funds to build networks offering free broadband services to residents of low-income communities. These communities include, but are not limited to, publicly supported housing developments and housing and mobile home parks with low-income residents. In 2022, 19 projects were awarded $1.4 million. In January 2023, we received 31 new public housing grant applications, requested a total of $1.7 million. We received applications for projects in 12 counties in Northern and Central California. Next slide, please. This slide provides a snapshot of the CPUC's last mile broadband initiatives. As previously discussed, we continue to encourage entities to apply for technical assistance and California Advanced Service Fund grants, as well as to explore the priority maps for the federal funding account, and please provide us feedback. Additionally, the Loan Loss Reserve Fund will provide $750 million in assistance to help ensure public entities and nonprofits to secure financing for broadband infrastructure projects. We anticipate a proposed decision on the Loan Loss Reserve Fund rules in the first half of 2023. More information on these grant opportunities are available on the public web pages, links for which are on these slides. You can also respond to inquiries and provide contacts for each of the grant programs to those who email statewidebroadband@cpc.ca.gov. Thank you very much, and this concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Lackritz. Do any members have questions about the CPUC update? Supervisor Alejo.
Yeah, thank you. I think Mr. Lackritz has spoken at our last CSAC conference on some of the grants. But I know like the technical assistance grant of $50 million, I think a lot of that has already been awarded. And so if you could just give us an update, how much has been awarded and how much is left? And will CPUC be asking for additional funding in the governor's budget proposal to augment monies available for others who haven't applied yet?
Thank you, Supervisor Alejo, for the question. We've awarded 69 grants for a total of $30 million. We've received, since we started the program in July, 111 applications, totaling $50.6 million. So we have more applications than we have funding. We're working with the administration to obtain additional funding for the program and remain confident that we'll be able to do that. We appreciate and have greatly valued the feedback we've gotten from and the local jurisdictions have already received the grants and how helpful they are. So we are working to make sure that we're able to continue to provide that funding to anyone who needs it. Thank you.
Great. So those other 20, the 20 million that are still in your coffers, those will be awarded by the end of this fiscal year, and then hopefully that the CPUC would get additional funds for the next fiscal year?
We anticipate awarding those over the next several months, and we anticipate being able to augment our funding within the current fiscal year. So we'd like to be able to have it be a continuous process so people can keep applying as they have their applications ready, and we can continue granting them.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Not hearing any, so we're going to be moving on to public comment. Mr. Przybyla, will you please provide the public comment guidelines and begin the public comment?
Yes. In order to ensure everyone who wishes to make public comment has the opportunity to do so, we respectfully request one person per entity and 2 minutes per person. The order of public comment will be online public comment submissions prior to the meeting, Zoom hands raised. Please use the raise hand feature on the lower toolbar, and phone hands raised via *9 on your phone's dial pad. We have not received any comment submissions prior to our meeting, so we will start with public comments via Zoom. Please raise your hand and I will help to unmute you. We have David Griffiths from Alpine County. You now can unmute.
Thank you to members of the Middle Mile Advisory Committee. Very much appreciate the work that you're doing and the opportunity to address you. I have two quick questions. As Cole mentioned at the beginning, I'm with Alpine County, Alpine County Supervisor, which is primarily the reason I'm here, but I'm also the Vice Chair of Golden State Connect Authority. My first question is on the convenings. I think that Mr. Adams was talking about with the tribes. I do want to make sure that the Washoe Tribe of Nevada and California is included in that. Sometimes because they're a bi-state tribe, they get left out of things. They represent 25% of the population of Alpine County, and so it's pretty important for them to make sure that they're part of the program. The second comment I've got is Mr. Naughton mentioned reaching out to consortia and local governments, and I just wanted to reinforce that that would be very much appreciated. It's very important, and I hope that that reaching out, the sooner the better. Thank you Thank you very much for your time and very much appreciate the work that you're all doing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We will now move on to Georgia. You can now speak.
Great. Thank you so much. My name is Georgia Savage and I work for Oakland Undivided. Thank you for your continued engagement with the people of Oakland. For areas like Oakland with limited access to affordable backhaul, the state's historic investment in open access infrastructure is transformative. Over 10 private ISPs have already expressed interest in leveraging this infrastructure, and we look forward to details about the terms of use. That being said, we come to you with a more urgent need today. As Director Amy Tong stated earlier in this meeting, coupling last mile investment with middle mile networks will be essential to achieving broadband for all. Our coalition asks you today, what does it mean to be a priority area? The CPUC recently released a map of priority areas that dictate which areas will be eligible for the $2 billion state last mile investment. If you pull up the CPUC's priority area map and zoom into Oakland, LA, San Diego, or any urban core, the places where 3 of every 4 disconnected Californians live, and you'll see something deeply troubling. Urban areas are overlooked, while the wealthier and wider suburbs surrounding the urban core are listed as priority zones. This is a huge missed opportunity to leverage the middle mile network, as according to CPUC's own data, our neighborhoods have the highest concentration of unconnected individuals, present a thriving business case, and would achieve equity goals by reversing long documented history of divestment in predominantly BIPOC urban core. So our ask today is that middle mile commissioners on the call today work closely with the CPUC to ensure that middle mile infrastructure is coordinated with the last mile investments to ensure they can be fully utilized for our 37,000 disconnected Oakland households. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. I will pause to allow for any more potential public comment. I did see a question that was in a Q&A feature, and I would love to extend the opportunity for Sarah House to address and ask her comment. Okay, not seeing any. Oh, Sarah?
Hi, thank you for the opportunity.
Yes.
I see that there was a budget deferral specifically for the CPUC, and this was for broadband expansion. And the deferral is, according to the governor's latest budget, $550 million at the CPUC and $750 million for the loan loss reverse impact. And so the question would be is how and what are the specific grant funding that was planned but would be deferred? What will there be like a list that was provided to the local agencies to understand what funding sources will be deferred to future years and no longer available?
Thank you for your public comment. And I believe we can have ensure that the CPUC can follow up with an answer to your question. In addition, during public comment, we did receive one via email, so I will read that out loud. This is from Maria. She's a city council member in Soledad. We are a city in South Monterey County that struggle with fast and dependable internet. This year alone, we have had our Spectrum internet go down for hours. One such internet blackout just happened yesterday. This has impacted some small businesses who are forced to close their doors and send workers home. It has also affected those who work from home and our students at all grade levels. Soledad is an underserved community. I would like to ask that Soledad be prioritized in the first phases of this project. Thank you for your time and your commitment to provide the infrastructure needed for fast and reliable service to all. Chief Deputy Director Johnson, I do not see any more public comment, and we'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Prisabilla. Would any committee members like to make additional comments before we close the meeting? I'm not seeing any hands up at the moment, so we'll move on to conclude. I wanted to thank all of the committee members, our presenters, and the public attending today's meeting for their contributions. It's a very busy time of year for everyone, and appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to attend. As mentioned in the beginning of the meeting, we are moving to a quarterly MMAC schedule, and the next meeting will be held on April 21st, 2023. With that, we will adjourn the meeting. We look forward to seeing everybody in April.